I never thought a snow machine would turn my life into a legal battlefield. But when you live in a homeowners association run by vindictive busybodies, anything becomes possible. My name is Robert Ashford, and I owned a decent chunk of property in the Pine Ridge Estates community just outside of Bozeman, Montana. The place was beautiful, nestled right up against national forest land with mountain views that would make anyone jealous. I had bought the property specifically because it came with 5 acres, which in HOA terms was massive. Most people in Pine Ridge had quarter-acre lots, maybe half an acre if they were lucky. My property sat at the very end of Deer Valley Road, the last house before the National Forest boundary. The previous owner, an elderly gentleman named Frank, had operated a small snow removal business from the property for decades. When I bought the place 3 years ago, Frank mentioned that he had maintained the fire access road that connected our street to Forest Service Road 337. It was not technically part of the HOA's maintained infrastructure, but it provided crucial emergency access to about 15 homes at our end of the development. The HOA had never paid for its upkeep, never contributed a dime, but they sure benefited from it. I bought Frank's old snow machine along with the property. It was a beast of a machine, a Tucker snow cat that could handle the brutal Montana winters like they were nothing. Frank showed me how to operate it, where the access road ran, and the basic maintenance schedule. He seemed relieved that someone would continue the tradition. The HOA never appreciated what I did, Frank told me on moving day, his weathered face serious. But the fire department sure does. You keep that road clear and you are doing everyone a favor. For 3 winters, I did exactly that. Every time we got significant snowfall, which in Montana was pretty much weekly from November through March, I would fire up the snowcat and clear the access road. It usually took about 4 hours to do the whole route, which wound through the forest for roughly 2 miles before connecting to the maintained Forest Service road. Nobody complained. Nobody said a word. The fire chief even stopped by once to thank me personally. Then Patricia Davidson became HOA president. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when someone says, HOA Karen. She was 47, had that specific haircut that demanded to speak to managers everywhere, drove a white luxury SUV with stick-figure family decals, and treated HOA rules like they were the 10 Commandments. She had moved into Pine Ridge about a year after me, into one of those fancy new constructions up on Highland Drive, nowhere near my property. The first notice arrived on a Tuesday in January. I was in my workshop when I heard the mail truck, and I trudged through the snow to grab whatever had been delivered. Along with the usual junk mail and a few bills, there was a formal letter on Pine Ridge HOA letterhead. Dear Mr. Ashford, it began. It has come to the attention of the Homeowners Association Board that you are operating commercial heavy equipment on residential property, in violation of Section 7.3 of the Pine Ridge Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. This equipment produces excessive noise during early morning hours and is not in keeping with the residential character of our community. You are hereby notified that you must cease operation of this equipment immediately. Continued violation will result in fines of $500 per occurrence. Sincerely, Patricia Davidson, HOA President. I read it 3 times, certain I was missing something. Commercial heavy equipment. I was clearing a fire access road that served their community. I grabbed my copy of the CCRs and flipped to Section 7.3. Sure enough, there was language prohibiting commercial vehicles or equipment from being stored or operated on residential lots. But there was also an exception clause for equipment necessary for property maintenance. Clearing a fire access road seemed pretty necessary to me. I decided to address it at the next HOA meeting, which according to the newsletter was scheduled for the following Thursday. I had never attended one before. I had always figured the HOA was handling basic stuff, like maintaining the entrance signs and organizing the annual summer picnic. I should have been paying more attention. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a modest building near the front entrance that mostly got used for exercise classes and kids' birthday parties. I arrived at 7 o'clock to find about 20 people scattered around the room, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows. Patricia sat at a table up front with two other board members I did not recognize. Patricia had that look of someone who enjoyed having power. She wore a cream-colored blazer over a turtleneck, her highlighted blonde hair perfectly styled. She noticed me immediately, and something flickered across her face that might have been annoyance or satisfaction that I had shown up. "Let us call this meeting to order," Patricia announced, banging a little gavel that seemed ridiculous for such a small gathering. She went through the standard procedures, reading minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for spring landscaping at the entrance, debating whether to allow holiday decorations past January 15th. I waited patiently, my folder of documents on my lap. New business. Patricia finally asked, looking around the room with a tight smile. I raised my hand. "I received a violation notice about operating my snow machine. I would like to discuss it." Patricia's smile did not waver. "Mr. Ashford, is it? Yes, we are well aware of your commercial operation. The board has received multiple complaints about the noise." "Multiple complaints?" I stood up, suddenly feeling like I was on trial. "From who?" "I have been clearing that access road for 3 years without any issues." "The identities of complainants are kept confidential," Patricia said smoothly. "But the fact remains that you are operating commercial equipment in violation of our CCRs. The board has been more than generous in giving you notice before implementing fines. That road provides emergency access to 15 homes," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "The fire department uses it. It has been maintained for decades." "That may be, but it is not the HOA's responsibility. If you choose to maintain it, that is your personal choice, but you cannot use prohibited equipment to do so. Perhaps you could hire a licensed snow removal company if you feel it is so important." I could not believe what I was hearing. "I am using the only equipment capable of handling that route. A regular plow truck cannot manage it. The terrain is too rough, the snow too deep. That is why Frank used the snowcat for all those years." "Frank's activities were never officially approved by the HOA," Patricia replied. "We are simply enforcing rules that have always existed. Now, if there is no other business—" "Wait," someone else spoke up. It was Dave Miller, who lived 3 houses down from me. "Patricia, that access road is actually important. Last year when the Johnson house caught fire, the fire trucks came in from both directions. It cut their response time significantly. The fire department has access via Deer Valley Road," Patricia said dismissively. "One entrance is sufficient. Not when Deer Valley is blocked by an accident or a snowdrift," Dave argued, "which happens pretty regularly out here." Patricia's expression hardened. "The board has made its decision. Mr. Ashford, if you continue to operate that equipment, you will be fined. Meeting adjourned." She banged her little gavel, and just like that, I was expected to stop maintaining a road that had been cleared for over 30 years. I left the meeting furious. On the way to my truck, Dave caught up with me. "She has had it out for you since she moved in," he said, shaking his head. "She complained to Frank about the noise too, tried to get him to stop. But Frank had been here so long, nobody took her seriously. Why does she even care?" She lives on the opposite side of the development. Control, Dave said simply. She wants everything done her way. Last summer she tried to fine the Hendersons for having the wrong shade of gray on their house trim. The wrong shade. Nobody else could even tell the difference. I drove home that night knowing I had a decision to make. I could fight the HOA through their internal process, which would likely go nowhere. I could hire a lawyer, which would be expensive and time-consuming. Or I could just stop clearing the road and let Patricia deal with the consequences. The next snowfall came 4 days later. 14 inches overnight, the kind of heavy, wet snow that made everything a challenge. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was Dave. "Are you clearing the access road today?" he asked. "I have to get to work, and Deer Valley is completely drifted shut at the turn near the Henderson place." "I cannot," I said, feeling guilty even though this was not my fault. "Patricia made it clear I will be fined if I use the snow cat." "You are serious? The road is completely impassable." "Take it up with the HOA," I said. "Maybe if enough people complain, they will change their minds." Dave swore under his breath and hung up. I spent that morning in my workshop, trying to ignore the sound of spinning tires and gunning engines as my neighbors attempted to get out via Deer Valley Road. The drift that had blocked the turn was massive, probably 6 feet tall, courtesy of the way the wind whipped through that particular section. It would take hours to clear by hand. By noon, my phone had rung 8 more times. I let most of them go to voicemail. The messages ranged from polite requests to help to angry demands to accusations that I was being petty. Only a few people seemed to understand that I was following the HOA's directive. That afternoon, I received another letter from Patricia. This one informed me that I was being fined $500 for unauthorized operation of commercial equipment because someone had heard the snow cat running on the day of the last snowfall, before the HOA meeting. Apparently, I was being retroactively punished. I called a lawyer that evening. His name was Gary Mitchell, and he specialized in property law and HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Bozeman, and he agreed to meet with me the next day. Gary was in his 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the patient demeanor of someone who had seen every ridiculous HOA story imaginable. "They are fining you for clearing an emergency access road," he said slowly after I explained the situation. "A road that is not even on HOA property. Technically, the first 100 feet crosses the corner of my lot," I explained. "The rest runs through National Forest on an easement established in the 1970s, but the HOA acts like I am running a commercial snow plowing operation." Gary leaned back in his chair. "Do you charge anyone for this service?" "Never, not once." "Do you maintain equipment on your property for any commercial purpose?" "No. The snowcat is purely for the access road and occasionally clearing my own driveway." "Then they are overreaching," Gary said. Section 7.3 is clearly intended to prevent people from running actual businesses out of their homes or storing fleet vehicles. Using equipment to maintain your own property falls under normal homeowner activities. So I can fight this. You can, but it will take time and money. HOAs are required to follow their own procedures, which usually means you have to go through their internal dispute resolution first, then potentially arbitration, and only then can you file suit. It could take months. And in the meantime, technically you are supposed to comply with their directive or pay the fines. Of course, if the fines are unreasonable or the directive is contrary to public safety, you have arguments to make. Has the fire department weighed in on this? I had not thought to contact them directly. Not officially. I would suggest having a conversation with the fire marshal, Get something in writing about the importance of that access road. It will strengthen your position significantly. I left Gary's office with a plan and a retainer agreement that made my bank account wince. But this was about principle now. Patricia could not just arbitrarily decide to eliminate a critical safety feature because she did not like the sound of a snow machine. The Bozeman Fire Department's administrative offices were located on North Rouse Avenue. I called ahead and made an appointment with Fire Marshal Thomas Weber for later that week. Marshal Weber was a no-nonsense guy in his 40s who had apparently been with the department for over 15 years. "Mr. Ashford," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I understand you have some questions about the Forest Service access road." "More like I need documentation of its importance," I said, explaining the HOA situation. Marshal Weber's expression darkened as I talked. When I finished, he pulled out a map of the area and spread it across his desk. "This access road," he said, pointing to the route I maintained, "is listed in our response plans for this entire sector. When we have a call in Pine Ridge Estates, especially on the eastern side, we stage equipment here." He tapped the National Forest Road. "Having this route clear means we can approach from two directions, which for structure fires is critical. It also gives us a secondary evacuation route if the main road is compromised." "Can you put that in writing?" "Absolutely. In fact, I am going to do more than that. I am going to contact your HOA directly and inform them that they are creating a safety hazard by preventing maintenance of this route. They will say it is not their responsibility to maintain it. Maybe not, but it is their responsibility not to actively prevent its maintenance. If someone gets hurt or property is lost because emergency services could not access the area quickly enough, they are opening themselves up to massive liability." Marshal Weber was good to his word. Within 3 days, the HOA received a formal letter from the fire department outlining the critical nature of the access road and strongly recommending that they not interfere with its maintenance. I received a copy, and I read it with deep satisfaction. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next HOA board meeting happened 2 weeks later, and this time I made sure to attend from the start. The room was more crowded than last time. Apparently, word had spread that there was drama, and people loved drama. Patricia called the meeting to order with her usual self-important air. She addressed several routine matters before finally acknowledging the elephant in the room. "The board has received correspondence from the fire department regarding the forest access road," she announced. "While we appreciate their input, the board maintains that enforcing our community's covenants is our primary responsibility. Mr. Ashford remains in violation of Section 7.3, and the fine stands." "You are ignoring the fire marshal," someone called out from the back. "We are not ignoring anyone," Patricia said sharply. "We are simply clarifying that HOA rules must be followed. If Mr. Ashford wishes to maintain the road, he may do so with compliant equipment." "There is no compliant equipment," I said, standing up. "A standard plow truck cannot handle that terrain. You are effectively banning maintenance of the road." "That is your interpretation," Patricia replied. "The board disagrees. Furthermore, we have received additional complaints about your property. Several residents have reported that you store the snow machine in an unsightly manner visible from the street. This violates Section 4.2 regarding property appearance." I almost laughed. The snow cat was kept in a large shed behind my house, barely visible from the road and then only if you specifically looked for it. "I need names," I said. "Who is filing these complaints? As I have stated before, complainants have a right to confidentiality." "This is ridiculous," Dave Miller stood up. Patricia, you are creating a safety issue because of some personal vendetta. Everyone knows it. Mr. Miller, you are out of order. No, you are out of order. This whole board is out of order. You are going to get someone killed because you do not like the sound of a snow machine. The room erupted in cross-talk. Some people were shouting support for Dave, others defending Patricia. The two other board members looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly. Order, I will have order. Mr. Miller, Mr. Ashford, if you cannot conduct yourselves appropriately, you will be asked to leave. I am leaving anyway, Dave said. This is a waste of time. He walked out and several other people followed. I stayed, though I was not sure why. Maybe I wanted Patricia to see that I was not going to be intimidated. The meeting concluded shortly after with nothing resolved. The fine stood, the prohibition stood, and the access road would remain unplowed unless I wanted to rack up $500 penalties every snowfall. That night, I called Gary Mitchell again. They are doubling down, I told him, even with the fire marshal's letter. Then we move forward with the formal dispute process. I will file a complaint with the HOA outlining your position and demanding a hearing before the full board with recorded minutes. If that does not work, we go to arbitration. How long will this take? Months, probably. In the meantime, I would advise you to meticulously document everything. Every snowfall, every time you cannot clear the road, any issues that arise because of the blocked access. Build your case. I followed his advice. Montana decided to cooperate by dumping snow on us almost weekly. Each time, I documented the snowfall amount, took photos of the impassable access road, and noted which neighbors were affected. Several people started parking their vehicles down on the main highway and walking up, because getting in and out via Deer Valley Road had become so unpredictable. 3 weeks into this standoff, we got a major storm. 23 inches in 36 hours, with winds that created drifts up to 8 feet tall. The county declared a state of emergency and advised people to stay off the roads. On the second day of the storm, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. Mr. Ashford, this is Emily Chen. I live on Aspen Court. My father is having chest pains and we called 911, but they are saying they cannot get to us. The main road is completely blocked. My heart sank. Did they try the access road? They said it is impassable. Please, is there anything you can do? My father needs help. I was already moving toward my coat. I am on my way. Wait, the HOA said you would be fined. I do not care about the fine. Call 911 back and tell them to stage an ambulance at the Forest Service Road. I will have the access route clear in 2 hours. I fired up the snowcat and started working. The snow was deep and heavy, but the machine handled it like it was built for exactly this purpose, because it was. I pushed through drifts, carved a path through sections where the snow had piled up against trees, and worked faster than I ever had before. 90 minutes later, I reached the Forest Service Road where an ambulance was waiting. I guided them back through the route I had just cleared. They made it to Emily Chen's house, treated her father, and determined he needed to be transported to the hospital immediately. The chest pains turned out to be a significant cardiac event. According to the paramedics I spoke with afterward, the delay in reaching him could have been catastrophic if it had gone on much longer. Emily Chen called me that evening in tears of gratitude. Her father was stable and expected to recover. I waited for the HOA's response. It came 2 days later. Another letter, another $500 fine, this time for emergency operation of prohibited equipment. Patricia had added a note at the bottom. While the board sympathizes with medical emergencies, rules must be consistently enforced. Future violations will result in escalating fines and potential legal action. I forwarded the letter to Gary Mitchell with a note. Let us go nuclear. Gary filed a comprehensive legal response that included not just my dispute over the fine, but also a counterclaim that the HOA was acting recklessly and creating a public safety hazard. He cited the fire marshal's letter, statements from affected residents, and the recent medical emergency. He demanded the fines be rescinded, the prohibition on the snow cat be lifted, and that the HOA formally acknowledge the importance of the access road. He also sent copies to every member of the HOA board and requested an emergency meeting to address the safety concerns. That got their attention. The two other board members, whose names I had learned were Susan Park and Jim Hendricks, apparently decided they did not want to be liable if something worse happened. They called for a special board meeting, which by HOA bylaws Patricia could not refuse. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning, and I showed up with Gary. The community clubhouse was packed. Word had spread about the medical emergency, and public opinion had shifted significantly. Even people who previously did not care much about the access road now understood its importance. Patricia looked cornered but defiant. Susan and Jim looked worried. "This meeting will come to order," Patricia began, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Before we begin regular business," Jim interrupted, "I would like to move that we suspend the fine against Mr. Ashford and rescind the prohibition on his snow removal activities." "Second," Susan said immediately. Patricia's face flushed red. "This is highly irregular. We need to discuss this in executive session first." "No," Gary said, standing up. "This needs to be addressed publicly and on record. Your prohibition nearly cost a man his life. The fire marshal has clearly stated the importance of this access road. My client has been maintaining it as a courtesy to this community for 3 years at his own expense, asking nothing in return. Your actions are not just unreasonable, they are dangerous." "The covenants are clear," Patricia insisted. "The covenants have an exception for necessary property maintenance," Gary countered. "Furthermore, the covenants also require the board to act in the best interests of the community. Blocking emergency access is not in anyone's best interest." "I call for a vote," Jim said. "All in favor of rescinding the fines and allowing Mr. Ashford to continue maintaining the access road." "This is not proper procedure," Patricia objected. "Actually, it is," Susan said quietly. "Any board member can call for a vote on a motion. We do not need your permission, Patricia." Jim and Susan raised their hands. Patricia sat with her arms crossed. "Motion carries 2-1, Jim announced. "Mr. Ashford, on behalf of the board, I apologize for this situation. Please send us an invoice for any legal fees you have incurred, and we will see what we can do." The room erupted in applause. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Gary shook my hand. "Well done," he murmured. But Patricia was not finished. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "If this board is going to ignore established rules, then I resign," she announced dramatically. "I will not be part of an organization that refuses to enforce its own covenants." "Your resignation is accepted," Susan said without hesitation. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out. The door slammed behind her so hard the windows rattled. The rest of the meeting was surprisingly productive. Jim was elected temporary president. They discussed possibly formalizing the maintenance of the access road, maybe even setting aside HOA funds to help offset my costs. Someone suggested a community appreciation dinner in the spring. As people filtered out afterward, several neighbors came up to thank me personally. Emily Chen's daughter gave me a tight hug. "My dad wants to meet you when he is out of the hospital," she said. "He keeps telling everyone that you saved his life." I did not feel like a hero. I had just done what needed to be done. But it felt good to have the community's support. I thought that was the end of the story. It should have been. But Patricia Davidson was not someone who let things go. 2 months later, in March, I received a certified letter. Not from the HOA this time, but from a law firm in Billings. Patricia was suing me personally for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She claimed that I had orchestrated a campaign to have her removed from the board, that I had made false statements about her character, and that the stress of the situation had caused her significant psychological harm. The lawsuit was completely frivolous, but it still had to be answered. Gary took one look at it and shook his head. "This is a slap suit," he said. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She is trying to punish you for standing up to her. The good news is that Montana has anti-slap statutes. We can get this dismissed and potentially recover your attorney fees." Potentially. Nothing is guaranteed in court, but this is about as clear-cut as it gets. You engaged in protected speech about a matter of public concern. She has no case. We filed a motion to dismiss under Montana's anti-slap law. The hearing was scheduled for late April in Gallatin County District Court. I had to take a day off work to attend, which annoyed me on principle. Patricia was costing me time and money even when she was clearly in the wrong. Judge Raymond Foster presided over the hearing. He was an older gentleman with a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. Patricia's attorney, a young guy who looked like he had just passed the bar, made his arguments about how I had supposedly damaged Patricia's reputation and caused her emotional distress. Gary systematically dismantled each claim. He presented the timeline of events, the fire marshal's letter, the documentation of the medical emergency, the HOA meeting minutes showing that the other board members had voted against Patricia, not that I had orchestrated anything. "Your Honor," Gary concluded, "Mr. Ashford did nothing more than defend himself against unreasonable HOA actions and advocate for community safety. Everything he said was true and part of his legitimate participation in HOA governance. This lawsuit is a transparent attempt to punish him for protected speech. We respectfully request that it be dismissed and that attorney fees be awarded." Judge Foster did not even take a recess to consider. He issued his ruling from the bench. This is precisely the type of case that Montana's anti-slap statute was designed to address. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate any probability of success on her claims. Motion to dismiss is granted. Furthermore, the defendant is awarded reasonable attorney fees. Counsel, please submit your fee statement within 30 days. Patricia, who was sitting in the gallery, looked like she had been slapped. Her attorney whispered something to her, probably explaining that she would now have to pay my legal bills on top of her own. Outside the courthouse, Gary was pleased. "That went as well as it possibly could have," he said. "She will owe you probably around $15,000 once we submit our fees, and she is out whatever she paid her own attorney. You think she will actually pay? If she does not, we can garnish her wages or put a lien on her property. She will pay." I drove home feeling vindicated but also exhausted. The whole ordeal had taken nearly 6 months of my life. 6 months of stress, legal fees, and constantly looking over my shoulder waiting for Patricia's next move. But it still was not over. In May, the Pine Ridge HOA held elections for the board. Jim Hendricks remained president. Susan Park stayed on as treasurer, and they added 3 new members who all seemed reasonable. At their first official meeting, they passed a resolution formally recognizing the access road as critical infrastructure, and allocating $2,000 annually from HOA funds to help offset maintenance costs. It was not much, but it was something, and more importantly, it was acknowledgement that what I did mattered. They also amended Section 7.3 of the covenants to clarify that equipment used for property maintenance, including maintenance of shared or emergency access routes, was explicitly allowed. The amendment passed with nearly unanimous approval from the membership. Patricia's house went up for sale in June. According to neighborhood gossip, she was moving to Missoula to be closer to her sister. I did not care where she went as long as it was far away from Pine Ridge Estates. The lawsuit settlement came through in July. Patricia's attorney sent a check for $14,750, representing Gary's fees and costs. I endorsed it over to Gary with a profound sense of relief. He had earned every penny. One evening in late July, I was working in my yard when a vehicle pulled up. It was Fire Marshal Weber. "Mr. Ashford," he said, climbing out, "I wanted to stop by personally. The department is presenting you with a Community Service Award at our annual dinner next month. I hope you will attend." I was stunned. "That is not necessary." "It absolutely is. You maintained critical emergency infrastructure at your own expense for 3 years, and when faced with absurd opposition, you stood your ground. The access road you maintain has been used in 4 emergency responses this year alone. You have likely saved lives, even if we cannot quantify exactly how many. Please come to the dinner. Bring a guest." I agreed, still somewhat overwhelmed. The dinner was a formal event at a nice hotel in downtown Bozeman. I brought my girlfriend Rachel, who I had been dating for about 6 months. She had heard all about the HOA saga and found the whole thing simultaneously infuriating and entertaining. The fire department presented me with a plaque and a handshake in front of about 200 people. Marshal Weber gave a short speech about the importance of community members who go above and beyond. I felt embarrassed by the attention, but also proud. Afterward, several firefighters came up to thank me personally. One of them, a younger guy named Chris, told me about responding to the Chen family's medical emergency. "We were staged at the highway for almost 20 minutes before you cleared that road," he said. "If you had not been able to do it, we would have had to either wait for county plows or hike in on foot with equipment. Either way, significant delay. You made our job possible that day." That put it in perspective for me. This had never been about winning a fight with Patricia Davidson or even about being right. It had been about doing something necessary that nobody else could or would do. As summer turned to fall, life in Pine Ridge Estates settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new HOA board was reasonable and communicative. They actually asked for input before making decisions. They published meeting minutes promptly. They treated homeowners like adults capable of managing their own properties. In October, Emily Chen's father, whose name was Richard, invited me over for dinner. He was a retired engineer in his 70s, healthy again after his cardiac event and subsequent surgery. "I understand you took a lot of grief for maintaining that road," he said over dessert. "I want you to know it was not for nothing. The paramedics told me later that the delay in reaching me could have been fatal. You literally saved my life." "I was just doing what needed to be done," I said, uncomfortable with the praise. "That is exactly what a hero does," Emily said. "They do what needs to be done, even when it is hard." Winter came early that year. The first significant snow fell in mid-November, about 15 inches overnight. I woke up early, had my coffee, and fired up the Snow Cat without any hesitation or worry about fines. I cleared the access road in my usual 4-hour route, packed the snow down solid, and made sure the whole thing was passable for emergency vehicles. As I was finishing up, a sheriff's deputy pulled up to where I was working near the Forest Service Road junction. For a moment my heart jumped, wondering if somehow Patricia had found another way to cause trouble, but the deputy was smiling as he rolled down his window. "You are Robert Ashford. That is me. Just wanted to introduce myself. I am Deputy Mark Torres. I patrol this sector. The sheriff wanted me to touch base with you and let you know we have this road marked as a priority route now. If you ever need assistance with anything, you give us a call." He handed me a card with his direct number written on the back. "Appreciate it," I said, genuinely touched. "No, we appreciate you. Not many people would do what you do, especially after the hassle you went through." He drove off, and I stood there in the cold morning air, surrounded by snow-covered forest, feeling more content than I had in a long time. This was my home. This was my community. And I was part of something larger than myself. The rest of that winter passed without incident. Snow fell. I cleared the road. Life went on. The HOA even sent out a newsletter in February highlighting the access road and thanking me publicly for maintaining it. Jim Hendricks wrote a personal note at the bottom saying that the community was lucky to have members who contributed so much. In March, Patricia Davidson's house finally sold. A young family with 2 kids moved in. They were friendly and normal and had no apparent interest in starting HOA drama. I met them at the mailbox one day, and they mentioned they had specifically been attracted to Pine Ridge because of the strong community spirit and safety features, including the well-maintained emergency access routes. I did not mention that those routes had almost ceased to exist because of the previous owner of their house. As winter finally released its grip and spring arrived in the Montana mountains, I found myself reflecting on the whole experience. It had been frustrating, infuriating, expensive, and time-consuming. But it had also been necessary. Sometimes standing up for what is right costs something. Sometimes doing the right thing means conflict. The alternative would have been to give in, to let Patricia shut down the access road, to prioritize avoiding confrontation over community safety. And that was simply not acceptable. One warm evening in April, the HOA organized a community barbecue at the clubhouse. It was well attended, with families and neighbors mingling, kids running around, the smell of burgers and hot dogs filling the air. Jim Hendricks stood up on the small deck and made a few announcements about upcoming summer projects. Then he said something unexpected. "Before we eat, I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone who exemplifies what it means to be a good neighbor. Robert Ashford has maintained our emergency access road for 4 years now, asking nothing in return. He faced down unreasonable opposition, stood up for community safety, and never wavered. He made sure that when Emily Chen's father needed help, that help could get there. He has worked with our fire department and law enforcement to keep us all safer. Robert, could you stand up?" I stood reluctantly as everyone turned to look at me. Then they started applauding. It built from a few people to everyone there, a genuine outpouring of appreciation that made my throat tight. "We took up a collection," Jim continued, "and we want to help offset your fuel and maintenance costs for the snowcat." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $3,500 and a card signed by what looked like 50 different people. I was not usually at a loss for words, but I stood there holding that envelope, looking at all these faces, some of whom I barely knew, and I felt the full weight of what community actually meant. "Thank you," I finally managed. "I do not do this for recognition or money. I do it because it is right, but I appreciate this more than I can say. Thank you." Rachel squeezed my hand as I sat back down. People came by throughout the evening to chat, to thank me personally, to tell me they had always appreciated what I did even if they had never said so before. As the sun set behind the mountains and the party wound down, I looked around at Pine Ridge Estates, at this community I had chosen to call home, and I felt genuinely grateful. Not just because the HOA nightmare was over, but because it had revealed something important. Most people are reasonable. Most people want to do right by their neighbors. It only takes one or two difficult personalities to create chaos, but it also only takes one or two principled people to stand up and make things right again. Patricia Davidson was gone, taking her petty tyranny with her. The access road remained open and maintained. The community was safer because of it. And I had learned that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought over things that should not be controversial at all: safety, common sense, and basic human decency. That summer, I continued my routine. Snow would fall, I would clear the road, life would go on. But now there was official recognition, community support, and a HOA board that actually functioned the way it was supposed to. The annual $2,000 from the HOA helped with diesel and maintenance. The community collection had built up a nice cushion for future repairs. In August, I got word through Gary Mitchell that Patricia had tried one more legal maneuver. She had attempted to appeal Judge Foster's ruling on the SLAPP suit. The Montana Supreme Court declined to hear the case without comment, meaning Judge Foster's decision stood. She would not be getting her money back, and there would be no vindication for her position. Gary called me with the news. "That is the absolute end of it," he said. "She has no more options. It is over." And it was. Finally, completely, definitively over. As I write this now, it has been a full year since Patricia resigned from the HOA board. Pine Ridge Estates has been peaceful and well managed. The new board members are engaged but not overbearing. They handle actual issues, legitimate concerns, real problems. They do not manufacture controversies or abuse their power. The access road remains clear and maintained. I have upgraded some of the equipment, added better marking posts along the route, and worked with the Forest Service to improve drainage in a few problem areas. It has become something I take pride in, not just a chore but a genuine contribution to my community's welfare. Fire Marshal Weber stops by occasionally to check on things and chat. Deputy Torres waves when he sees me working. My neighbors have become actual friends, not just people I nod to at the mailbox. The snow cat sits in my shed, ready for the next winter. No HOA fines, no threatening letters, no legal battles. Just a machine that does an important job when it is needed. I learned something valuable through this whole ordeal. Institutions are only as good or bad as the people running them. HOAs get a terrible reputation, and sometimes they deserve it. But they can also function properly when reasonable people are in charge. The rules themselves were never really the problem. It was one person's determination to enforce them unreasonably, to prioritize control over common sense, to value petty authority over community welfare. Patricia Davidson probably still thinks she was in the right. People like that usually do. They convince themselves that rules are absolute, that anyone who questions them is wrong, that compromise is weakness. They never see how much damage they cause, or how their rigid thinking endangers others. But she is gone now, and the community she tried to control through intimidation and arbitrary enforcement has moved on without her. We are better for her absence. The access road proves it. The improved relationships among neighbors prove it. The functional, reasonable HOA board proves it. Sometimes standing up to bullies, even bureaucratic ones, is the only option. Sometimes you have to fight for what is right even when it is expensive and stressful and would be easier to just give in. because giving in would not have been easier, not really. It would have meant accepting an unsafe situation, abandoning a responsibility I had taken on, letting one difficult person dictate terms to an entire community. I am glad I fought. I am glad I stood my ground. And I am especially glad that it is over, and I can simply go back to being a good neighbor who clears a road when it snows, helps out when needed, and contributes to a community that, despite its flaws and occasional dysfunction, is full of good people trying to do right by each other. The pine trees around my property are heavy with new growth. The mountains stand eternal against the big Montana sky. The snow cat waits patiently in its shed. And when the first snow of next winter falls, I will fire it up without hesitation, clear the access road like I always have, and know that I am exactly where I am supposed to be, doing exactly what I am supposed to do. That is enough. That is everything.